Hey folks, this is Linda Matchett. I know the screen was black to start with. I apologize. I had forgotten to press the button that had the camera facing toward me, so that didn't do much of us any good. So I've got a couple of things to show you tonight. The first, again, I think I've been sharing that we've got our house on the market, and so we are cleaning out beyond belief, and so I'm finding all kinds of treasures I knew I had, but I guess I had forgotten. So the first thing I've got tonight is Life magazine. This is the April 23rd, 1945 edition, and it is fascinating. It is chock full of information and coverage of when Roosevelt passed away. And so just to show you some things. Sorry about that. Okay, so for example, they've got a huge article on his passing away and specifically what he passed away from, and then there are photographs from the funeral. There are quotes. It's interesting. They actually had correspondents from overseas interview people from different countries. And they have quotes: London, Moscow, Chongqing, Rio de Janeiro, Belgrade, Rome. So they kind of got the man on the street, if you will, quotes from folks about how they felt about the fact that Roosevelt had passed away. There also, of course, is an editorial. And then there's a fascinating article on Harry Truman having been sworn in. Some interesting facts about Truman. He is the first Missourian, and I did not think to look and see if he's the only person from Missouri who has served in the executive office. But he was the first to be president at that time when he was sworn in after FDR's death, and he was the 7th vice president to take over due to death in office. So I thought that was really interesting. And then finally, what is very interesting in here, and I read the article and I was trying to decide if the same coverage would be done today, but same edition of the newspaper that's covering FDR's life and death and legacy, there's a fairly large article about Hitler. It's a 4 or 5 page article, and it's interesting because I think, well, we just went through an entire world war, and frankly, if people obviously had to know about Hitler and who he was and what he was about, were these... How could they not have known about him? So I think it's interesting that the article is here in the magazine, and I just wonder if we would have done the same coverage. And I'm not a news hound. My brother is a news junkie, and he loves watching the news. So perhaps shame on me, but I don't recall that there was a lot of articles and coverage about the man. For example, during Desert Storm, the leaders that we were against, paying war against, were their coverages in the magazines and newspapers of a personal nature. So really interesting to have this Life magazine. I got it from my grandfather's house when we were closing up his place. He passed away in the mid-90s. And as you say, this is 1945. He had all kinds of things that we found, and one of which was the Life magazine. The second thing I want to show you tonight is of a personal nature. My great uncle Norman, who I never met because he passed away in 1939, actually fought in World War I. And we actually have his enlistment record, and then his discharge paperwork. Excuse me. So he enlisted on September 4th, 1918 in Baltimore. And I think it's interesting that, that was almost at the end of the war, so I'm not quite sure. And he was a machinist. Let's see, his physical condition was good. So then, and then we have his discharge, which was a little over a year later. And so we have his discharge papers. He was a private chemical warfare service, and in fact, that's why he passed away, was from sustaining a mustard gas attack, and so he was mustered out of the Army on disability and ended up in a sanatorium, which is where he met my great aunt Dot, and they got to know each other. They fell in love, and they got married. They did not meet until quite a bit later. Here we go. Yeah, this is the certificate. It says, I hereby certify that on this 9th day of April, 1928, at Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church in Thurmont, Maryland, Norman Hatter and Dorothy Holland were by me united in marriage in accordance with the license issued by the clerk of the circuit court. So I don't know a lot about her other than what I knew her as an elderly woman. She was my great aunt. I know that she was a nurse, and that's how they met. She was a nurse at the sanatorium where he was located and spending his years because of, again, the mustard gas attack that he suffered during World War I. And you genealogy folks are one up on me by knowing how to kind of dig down and find out how this all came about, how they met, and that sort of thing. So I think I have an assignment. And then unfortunately he did pass away in 1939. So they were only married for 11 years. They were a little bit older when they got married. And from what I understand, they were very, very happy. And as a matter of fact, she never married again. So they were very, very happy. So a short episode tonight, but I did want to share those items with you. I know there's a lot of interest in World War I because of the anniversaries over the last handful of years, the 100th anniversary of World War I. And I was pleased to discover that one of my relatives, by marriage, actually served in the military during the war. So thank you for stopping by, and I hope you will join me again next week at the same time, 6:45 on Thursdays for Moments in History. This is Linda Shenton Matchett, and if you are interested in history like I am, you may be interested in signing up for my newsletter, which you can do on my website, which is also where my blog is found, and that is www.lindashentonmatchett.com. So thanks again for stopping by Moments in History, and I hope you have a great week.